Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session of China Talk of this semester. The topic of tonight, as you already know, is China horror, ghosts, monsters, and things that go bump into the night. Before I get started, I'll just introduce shortly what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about these things that go bump into the night as they are represented in Chinese classical fiction, with a particular focus on supernatural tales from the 6 dynasties. And then at the end of my speech, I will also introduce a book that is one of the masterpieces of classical Chinese fiction, and it's Ganbao, In Search of the Supernatural. I start with this quotation from the Analects. Talking about Confucius, it says, 自不与怪力乱神. So the master never talked of prodigies, feats of abnormal strength, natural disorders, or spirits. But apparently, he was the only one, because after him, the supernatural has filled the pages of classical Chinese fiction and classical Chinese literature in many different ways. And in particular, during the 6 dynasties, supernatural tales took the form of a particular literary genre that goes under the name of Zhiguai. And Zhiguai is usually translated in different ways. Records of the strange, records of anomalies, accounts of the strange. This word Zhiguai first appears in one of the earliest philosophical texts of classical Chinese tradition, that is the Zhuangzi, where the author is talking about a mythical animal that is half a bird and half a fish, and it can change its shape from fish to bird and back. And talking about this animal, he says that it's also quoted in one book that is called Qixie. And then he says, 知怪之也. So this book is a record of marvels. After this period, later on, this term 知怪 has been used to identify, to refer to this particular literary genre that is, as I said, includes all the tales of the supernatural. Supernatural tales, they flourish in the 6 dynasties. And you have to know that these tales are usually written in a very simple prose in classical Chinese. They're usually very short. The original tales sometimes only have 100 or 200 characters. And the plot is very simple. They have few characters, 2, maybe 3, no more than that. The aim of these tales in the beginning and also in later dynasties is very specific. They are all didactic. They want to tell something to the reader. For this reason, the style is very close to historical description. This means that the style originally is also a little bit dull or very, very simple. This connection with historiography has been kept also by authors of Zhiguai tales in later dynasties. In fact, all the authors usually refer to their work as records, accounts, biographies, and I don't know if any of you is familiar with Pu Songlin. In the Qing dynasty, he referred to himself as the historian of the strange. So not the author, not the writer, not the storyteller of the strange, but the historian of the strange, to emphasize the connection that these tales had with ancient historiography. These tales, since they have the style that is very close to this historical style, very often have some reference to the origin of the tale. They have some sentences that are considered a kind of declaration of truthfulness, because the author, in order to make readers believe that the thing that he is talking about into the story really happened, name an eyewitness, usually giving the name and surname of a particular person, and the birthplace. That is also usually the birthplace or the location where the strange event actually took place. And this I took from one collection of the Qing dynasty that is called Arsholu. And you see that one of the tales, for example, has this last sentence. So the ending of the story goes like this. This happened during the spring of the Genshu year. Wang Xiaoshan, so surname and name of the eyewitness of the eastern village, heard the story at the end of his journey to the capital and told it to me. So always a particular reference to a person of whom the author gives usually name and surname to improve the truthfulness of the tale. Now let's talk a little bit of the supernatural. What is the supernatural in Chinese tradition? Supernatural in China encompasses a wide range of different things, bizarre, grotesque creatures, and some of them are listed here. So we have monsters, ghosts, spirits, goblins, and immortal, and many more. Tonight, though, as was written also in the title of the presentation, I will only focus on two of these categories. So we have the monsters and the ghosts. Before we start to talk about this in detail, have you ever thought of what is a monster or how to define a monster? Anyone?
Physical appearance.
Something else?
Being eager.
Yes? Okay.
Bad behavior.
Bad behavior also. Okay, so if we take the word monster and we try to go back to the origins of the word, usually this word is linked to the idea of warning or showing. Warning from the Latin monere, that means to warn, so to warn against something. And then another one that I like a little bit more, from the Latin monstrare, so to show, to display, that becomes, for example, in Italian, mostrare, mostro. So the idea of showing and display something that is very different. For example, there is one Italian philosopher and doctor that, talking about the monsters, he said monsters are thus named because they are such that their new and incredible appearance stirs admiration and surprise in the beholders, and startle them so much that everyone's supposed to show them to the other. So from here, the idea of to show, to display the thing that is different and that stirs admiration and surprise. Leaving aside the origin of the word, if we open a modern dictionary and we look up the word monster, these are some of the definitions that we can find. A strange or horrible imaginary creature, an animal or plant of abnormal form or structure, or of strange and terrifying shape. One that is unusually large for its kind, one who deviates from normal behavior, a person of unnatural or extreme ugliness. So the focus in this definition is always on the monster being something strange, different, unusual, abnormal. Something that is different from the standard. So something that is not like us is the other, so it's the monster. This idea of monsters being something different, something strange, or something unusual, we can also find it in Chinese. So among the definition of this word, guai, if we look up one of the ancient dictionaries, the Shuowen Jiezi, under the word guai, we find this definition, yi ye. So it's something different, it's something strange, and this can be connected to the same idea that we find in the Western definitions. One interesting thing about the Chinese monsters is they are usually derived from the natural world. Monsters usually are animals, plants, object of daily use that at some point receive a special spirit or energy and they are transformed into a monster. So a monster, not very often, so it's unusual for a monster to be originated from a human being. This we also find, for example, in the anthology that I'm going to introduce later on, Xi'an by Gambao, where the author says that monsters are formed when a certain spirit or energy is attached to concrete things. So again, the idea that a monster comes from the natural world more than from human beings. So this for the monsters. What about the ghosts? Ghosts, different than the monsters, come from a human being. So a person dies and then becomes Gui.
In some Chinese monsters, in some Chinese ghosts, it's generally possible to ancient.
So can you speak louder?
A ghost is not only derived from human death, but it is also derived from the death of any other being.
Yes, thank you. And generally speaking, maybe we just link this to the idea of the human body, just of a human being dying and becoming later on a ghost. In fact, there is a common pun that links the two words Gui third tone and Gui first tone. So the ghost and then to return, because in fact, a ghost is a revenant or one who returns. This is also coming from Xi'an, where we see that that's the definition of a man. So the man that returns is a ghost. So Renso Gui Wei Gui. Okay, so we hear. In Chinese tradition, there are many tales talking about ghosts. So many that some are wondering why this tradition is so rich in Chinese literature. Maybe it could be the fact that the supernatural, so the spiritual world, has always fascinated people in different periods, in different eras, and in different geographical locations. Or if we want to see it from a different perspective, the big numbers of ghost stories in China may be linked to the fact that more people have lived and died in China over the centuries, more than anywhere else in the world. So from here, as Arthur Waley said, we have these big numbers of ghost stories. How are ghosts represented in Zhiguai tales? There are some anecdotes talking about ghosts being pale, with a big mouth. They have big eyes, black eyes without pupil. They have a very powerful sight because they have to be able to see during the night. Their eyes also shine. There is one quotation, like the flame of a lamp into the night. They also have very sensitive hearing, so they are scared by strong noises. And maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is also one of the reasons why during Chinese New Year there are a lot of firecrackers, so to scare away ghosts and monsters who fear these very loud noises. So big mouth, they're pale. What else? This is very Chinese, so they have claws with no hands, they cast no shadow, and in some of the stories they are described as not eating, or at least they're not eating food, but they eat with the nose to inhale the flavors coming from food and wine. So maybe next time if your meal is tasteless or doesn't have any flavor, consider the fact that maybe behind you there might be a ghost enjoying your meal and inhaling all the flavors coming from that. Something more about the ghosts, hairs. They have very particular hairs in some stories. For example, there's one tale in the Zubuyu that describes this ghost having hairs like the flame of a candle, that soft and black, just like the cow skin. And even if you cut them with a knife or burn it with the flame, they cannot be destroyed. Talking about hairs, in some tales we also find ghosts described with hairy bodies. There's in fact one of the story that goes like this. There's one man that sees a very beautiful woman, so he's trying to approach her, talk to her, and at some point when he finally touches her, he finds a body that is cold as ice and filled with long and thick hairs. So he runs away because he's absolutely sure that the beautiful lady indeed is a ghost. So the idea of ghosts being a little bit like savages or primitive people. Again, on the idea of ghosts being cold as ice, this is very appearing rather often in the tales of classical Zhiguai tradition. For example, in one of these stories, there is one man that is kind of tired, and he wants to find a place to sleep. And the only place he found is a wooden box. So he goes and falls asleep onto the wooden box, unaware of the fact that inside the box there was a corpse and then a ghost. The ghost is trying to get out, but the man is too heavy, so he cannot. But the next day, he goes to his friend and tells them of this very strange dream that he had. And he said, I had the feeling during my dream of a hand touching me, and this hand was cold as ice. So again, the idea of ghosts being cold as ice. Also, there's another story that approached this topic from a different direction. The main characters of the stories are real human beings, so they're not ghosts. But they are playing playing games pretending to be ghosts. So one of the guys in this group, thinking about the traditional idea of ghosts being cold as ice, put his hand inside a bucket filled with ice water, and then goes to another guy of the group and grab his arm. And this guy, feeling the touch of his hand that is cold as ice, he actually believed that he had met a real ghost, and he dies, unfortunately, out of fear. So again, this idea of ghosts being cold as ice. Okay, so this is generally speaking, how they are represented in some of the tales of the ancient tradition. So Zhiguai tales, supernatural tales. As I said, tonight I'm also going to use this book to introduce very, very shortly who's the author, what's the book about, the reasons why he decided to write this book, and then I selected 3 small stories from this collection to share with you. So the book is called In Search of the Supernatural, and the author is Gambao. It included 464 stories that are divided in different categories. And among these categories, we also find the stories of ghosts. Why Gambao decided to write this book? According to his preface, he wanted to prove that the supernatural world is real. He writes in the preface that the spirit and the supernatural world are not a fabrication. So he wants to make this point very clear also with these tales. Try to tell to the readers that the spiritual world and the supernatural world are not a fabrication, that they indeed exist. If we go through also the biography of the author, two reasons are listed in there for that are the reason why he decided to write this book. He had two very strange events during his life. The first one is the story of the housemaid. It's written in his biography that his father, housemaid, his father had a beloved housemaid. And when he died, since the mother was very jealous of her, she pushed the housemaid alive into the vault. After 10 years, the mother also died. And when they opened the vault to put the mother's body inside, they find the housemaid sitting on the coffin of Gambao's father alive. So they take her out, and after a while she came back to her senses, just like nothing had ever happened. And when they asked the reason why she was still alive after 10 years, she said that Gambao's father had loved her during when he was alive, and continued to love her also when he was dead. So was giving her all the offerings of food and wine that he received from the relatives during the sacrifices and offerings. That's why she could survive. And that's the first reason. The second reason is also very strange or supernatural. Apparently, Gambao's brother also died, but for several days his body did not become numb, and instead he came back to life. And when he came back to life, started to tell everyone of all these beautiful things and amazing things that he had seen in the afterlife, on the other side of life. And so the biography of Gambao concludes with this line that says, "This is why Gambao began collecting ancient stories and new stories of the wonders of spirits, extraordinary people, and transformation of monsters." So two reasons for him to writing this book, and to write also in the preface, "I want to prove to everyone that ghosts are real." Inside this big collection of almost 500 tales, there are many tales about ghosts, and a big portion of them is focused on the idea of the known arguing. So is this one arguing about the known existence of ghosts? These kind of tales have also been labeled by Anthony Yu as the ghostly epilogue, because this story have basically a very standard plot. The plot is very standard, so there is one man that is very convinced of the fact that the ghosts are not real, so that ghosts do not exist. At some point, this man receives a guest. They start to argue about the fact that, about the theories of the existence of ghosts and the known existence of ghosts. And the man is usually very good in defending his argument, and the only way for the ghost to prove that he is real is, ta-da, not in this shape, but he reveals himself as being a ghost. And there's always the one sentence that is pretty much standard. It says, "I am myself a ghost. How can you not believe that ghosts are real? I'm here in front of you." So he gives to this non-believer a visual evidence of the fact that ghosts indeed exist. Visual evidence that can be more powerful of all the dissertation and talking that I had done before. in the story. So, for example, this is one of the stories about the ghost revealing himself to a skeptical man. So there is this man that is called Ranjan, and he's again a firm believer of the known existence of ghosts. And then he receives a guest as usual, and they start to debate about this. And Ranjan, for a long time, speaks on ghosts and God, and they start to argue back and forth about this. And since the guest is not able to refute Ranjan, he says, ghosts and spirits have been believed by ancient and modern sages and famous men. Why do you alone say that they are non-existent? I, for one, am a ghost. And then, with these words, the guest's appearance changed, and a moment later, he disappeared. So Ranjan, depressed, could not utter a word, and a year later, he died of illness. And in fact, this is a very common feature of this state. The man that is surprised by seeing a real ghost in front of him usually died immediately or after a while. In the ghostly epilogue, there's also this one that is called Black Coat and White Robe Ghost. And this is pretty much on the same plot with a twist. Because there's, yes, one man that is a firm believer on the non-existence of ghosts, and he has a pupil. And the pupil, of course, follows his master, and he also does not believe in the existence of ghosts. This pupil at some point receives a guest, and the plot goes just like that. I am a ghost, so how can you not believe in ghosts? And the pupil at some point asks a question and says, okay, but why are you here? And the ghost says, I'm here to take your life. You will die tomorrow at lunchtime. And the pupil says, oh no, please, please spare my life. I don't want to die. Please don't kill me. And he's so good at doing this that the ghost at some point says, okay, but I have to kill somebody. Is there anyone that looks like you? And the pupil said, yes, my colleague. He really looks like me. He looks very much like me. So the two go to the next room, to the officer's tent, and the ghost sits in front of this colleague. And then here I read, he took out a chisel and fixed it into the officer's head, and then kept striking at the chisel with a hammer. And the officer said, there's a little pain in my head. And of course, the pain got worse, and he died right after. So the pupil was saved, and his colleague instead was killed by the ghost. So this is the second story, and this is the last one. It's maybe the most famous one inside the collection of Gambao. It's called Son Din Bo Sell the Ghost. And instead of having the text that is not very clear, I found these very beautiful pictures, and I decided to use them to tell the story of Son Din Bo. So the story goes like this. This man at some point is going to a fair or a market, and he meets one ghost. They start to talk and says, okay, where are you going? I'm going to the market. And the ghost says, I'm going to the market as well. Let's go together. Along the way, the ghost thinks that they're walking too slow. So says, why don't we carry each other? So that way would be faster. Teamwork carry the ghost, and it's absolutely like weightless. When they switch role and the ghost has to carry Son Din Bo, he feels that it's very, very heavy. So he asks Son Din Bo, says, how come you're so heavy? And Son Din Bo says, I am a new ghost. So I didn't really get rid of my body yet. So please forgive me. I am a new ghost. That's why I'm so heavy. After a while, they have to cross a stream. So the ghost goes first, and he can swim quickly without making any noise. But then also Din Bo has to cross the stream, but he's a human, so he's making a lot of noise and taking a lot of time to cross the stream. So again, the ghost asks, why are you so loud and why is it taking you so long? And he uses the same excuse. I am a new ghost, so I'm still didn't get rid of my body. I don't know how to swim properly as ghosts do. And then he has an idea. He says, what as a new ghost I should be aware of? So is there any tip that you want to tell me? And the ghost says, we pretty much can survive everything, but avoid human spit. So never be spat on by a human. And said, okay, I will remember that. And indeed, they arrive at the fair, at the market, and Son Dinpo is there because he wants to make some profit. And he's a very clever guy, so he turns around and spits onto the ghost that is changed into a goat. And he sells the goat that before was a ghost at the market for a very high price. And the story concludes, finish with the sentence that says, Son Dinpo is a ghost seller, and he also can make a high profit out of ghosts. So this is the end of the story of Son Dinpo. And with this, I think that we can also go to some conclusions. As you have seen, Chinese supernatural tales of the 6 dynasties are not really spine-chilling or terrifying. They don't appear to be so scary. Some of them are indeed humorous and funny, and they try to approach the subject from a different perspective. So not presenting ghosts as something very scary, but in a different way. These tales around the 6 dynasties have something in common. They are didactic because the authors, like Gan Bao, want to let the reader be aware of the fact that the supernatural world exists. It's not a fabrication, he says in the preface. And this is not strange, actually, because can be linked to the idea, to the fact that early Chinese fiction was didactic in some way, and he wanted to convince the reader more than amuse the reader. So the didactic element is very strong. If we focus on ghost tales, for example, we have seen that many of these tales, for example, describe characters that cross the boundary between life and death. Because in some way, the authors want to explore the relationship between the living and the dead people. And since at that time, they were still trying to become more familiar with the unknown, with the spiritual world and the supernatural world, they try to define and shape this relation and the reign of the hereafter. So basically, the writers of the 6 dynasties, and in particular Gan Bao, since they are strong believers in the existence of ghosts and of the supernatural world, they want to convince the reader that this aspect of life actually is not only a fabrication, but is something real. They also try to describe, or want to describe, the supernatural world in order to come to terms with something that is unknown, unfamiliar, or that has been explored but not in its at the full extent. So we can say that writing this kind of tales, through these tales, the writers try to carry out something that can be called the domestication of the strange. So try to move the unknown and the unfamiliar into the real of the known or knowledgeable and familiar, so that all these things, the supernatural element, will not be so scary anymore. So we have to keep in mind that even if the focus of these tales, or the main characters, are using the dead, like the ghosts or the dying, the values and concerns of the living predominate because they want to teach something to the living using characters that are already dead. And with this, thank you. I finished.